take a fast class at the College of Southern Nevada. Short-term 4 to 8 week classes start soon. Flexible classes on days, nights, weekends, and online. Hurry, sign up today at csn.edu. We are visionaries, achievers, artists, and athletes. We are the College of Southern Nevada. So apply today at csn.edu. Achieve, succeed, and prosper.
Gambling consumed my time. I was losing my money, my friends, and my family. I needed help. After I spoke to a counselor, I started piecing my life back together. Find help with problem gambling at projectworthnv.org.
Paid for by the Nevada Department of Health and Human Services with state funds allocated to problem gambling services.
A healthy life starts with great sleep. Wake refreshed with Avocado's GOTS certified organic green mattress, delivering breathable, back-loving support. Natural materials from Avocado's own sustainable wool and latex farms, easy financing, a 1-year sleep trial, and deep, restorative slumbers. Organic sleep awaits at avocadomattress.com.
Mine too. But the US government wouldn't take no for an answer. With all the media coverage surrounding the sphere, the military wanted to have a look. Jerry was reluctant to let them have it, but there was concern that the sphere could be unexploded ordnance. So Jerry agreed to loan it to the Navy for 2 weeks, but if it was determined that it wasn't military property, she wanted it returned. She even made the Navy sign a contract.
I told them we expect a comprehensive report in 2 weeks, and if it can't be identified as government property, it is to be returned to us.
Navy scientists performed a number of tests. They measured it at exactly 7.96 inches in diameter, and it weighed 21.34 pounds. The shell was made of some kind of magnetic stainless steel alloy. It could withstand extreme heat and extreme pressure of 120,000 pounds per square inch. This thing was tough. According to the spectrograph, it was made of stainless steel grade 431. The Navy also found that the sphere was intensely magnetic. It had 4 magnetic poles, 2 positive and 2 negative. The magnetic fields varied in strength and were in an unusual pattern. The next test was X-rays, and that's where they ran into a little snag.
Our first X-ray attempts got us nowhere. We're going to use a more powerful machine on it and also run spectrograph tests to determine what metal it's made of. There's certainly something odd about it.
The X-rays showed nothing. So at the end of the 2 weeks, the Navy confirmed that it wasn't government property and wasn't dangerous, so it was returned to the Betts family. But something strange happened next. A Navy serviceman came to the Betts house to return the object. He was also carrying a manila envelope. And even though the Navy said they were unable to X-ray the sphere, that envelope contained X-rays. The images showed the entire internal structure of the sphere. The images also showed there was something inside. The results of the X-rays were surprising. The sphere had an outer shell that was about ½ an inch thick. Inside the sphere were different layers of steel of different densities. At the core of the sphere, about the size of an apple, was a hollow space. And in that space were 3 other smaller spheres, and each of them had tiny wires attached. One mystery was, what are these other objects inside the sphere? But an even bigger mystery, how did they get in there? Typically, you'd get objects into a sphere by either cutting it in half, then sealing it, or drilling out a hole and placing the objects in that way. But there was no hole and no seam. Even Navy scientists couldn't figure it out. The Navy wanted to drill into it, but Jerry said no way. Now, during all this excitement, friends and neighbors and people in the media were suggesting that the sphere could be extraterrestrial. Because it responded to sound, had a magnetic field, and was almost indestructible, some people speculated it was an alien listening device. The Bettses didn't give much credence to these theories. until the Navy came back with nothing.
If no other explanation can be found that's as logical as any, who could say what's on another planet? Even speculations have been proven wrong. The Navy says what it isn't. They say it isn't an explosive, so we still want to know what it is.
So the Betzes reached out to scientists for answers. What the scientists found created even more questions. The first scientist to examine the sphere was Dr. Carl Williston of the Omega-1 Institute. He spent 6 hours running tests, and one of his strangest discoveries was that the sphere was emitting radio waves. He also confirmed the Navy's findings of 4 poles, but like the Navy, he couldn't explain the pattern of the magnetic fields. It defied the laws of physics. He also witnessed the sphere moving on its own across any surface. Dr. Williston confirmed the exterior was made of stainless steel grade 431, but he also found traces of an extremely heavy but unknown element. And a side note about Dr. Williston, there isn't any evidence that anyone by that name ever existed. And the Omega-1 Institute is also a bit of a mystery. Some have speculated that he was a foreign operative gathering intelligence on the object. The next scientist the Betts brought in was Dr. James Harder. He was an engineering professor and became a trusted advisor to the family. Dr. Harder confirmed Dr. Williston's findings and said the internal spheres were made of a material with an atomic number of 140. An atomic number is the number of protons an element has. The highest atomic number that occurs in nature is 92, uranium. It is possible to artificially increase the number of protons, but the highest scientists have been able to achieve is 118 protons. So the element found in the sphere does not occur on Earth. This led Dr. Harder to wonder if the sphere could be a damaged alien probe or anti-gravity device. The next scientist was Dr. J. Allen Hynek. He was a well-known astronomer and professor, but Dr. Hynek was best known for being a UFO advisor to the U.S. Air Force under 3 separate projects, including Project Blue Book, which investigated UFOs from 1952 to 1969.
And probably longer.
And probably longer.
And probably still.
And probably still. Dr. Hynek also confirmed the findings of the other scientists. And during this time of chaotic activity, something happened that made the Betts family very nervous. A group of scientists flew into Jacksonville, arrived at the Betts home, and offered Jerry $750,000 cash for the sphere. That would be worth almost $4 million today.
4 mil because of inflation, eh?
Yep.
And next year that'll be 6 million because of inflation.
I really hope you're wrong about that.
I'm not.
Anyway, there was something about these guys that rubbed Jerry the wrong way. When they asked to see the sphere, she said it wasn't there and turned down their cash offer. This really annoyed the men. And after they left, the family checked their backstory. Turns out it was all a lie. The family suspected this was probably a foreign government trying to acquire the sphere. And that's when the Betts family realized they were in danger. In the 1970s, the National Enquirer offered a cash award to anyone who could prove that there is life on other planets. Even though the Enquirer was a bit of a rag, the UFO panel they assembled contained a lot of well-respected people. Hynek and Harder were on the panel, but there were also multiple PhD holders, a former Supreme Court Justice, and a former United States Attorney General. The Betts family decided to send Terry and the sphere to this gathering. They didn't necessarily think the object was from outer space, but they figured with all these experts in one place, they could finally get some answers. After spending some time with the sphere, Dr. Hynek felt it was man-made, though everyone witnessed the sphere roll up a piece of plexiglass from a dead stop. Nobody could explain that. When the idea of drilling came back up, Dr. Harder warned that if the sphere contained material with an atomic number as high as 140, drilling into it could cause it to go critical.
What do you mean critical?
At that time, the only way to create elements with an atomic number higher than 92 was with a nuclear reactor. The protons within the sphere were much higher than anything ever discovered or created. So drilling into it
could make it go boom?
Right. But the story takes another turn. While at the Enquirer's office, Terry got a call that said his mother had an accident. Terry tried to call her but couldn't get through, so he flew back immediately.
With the ball, I hope.
Nope, he left it behind.
Oh no, you knucklehead.
When Terry got home, Jerry was fine. Someone was trying to separate Terry from the sphere. Jerry told her son to go back to the Enquirer immediately and get it, so he did. At first, the Enquirer didn't cooperate. They gave him a story and seemed to be stalling. so Terry demanded it be returned. They finally admitted that they couldn't return it. It was gone. Eventually, the people at the Inquirer admitted that the UFO panel had taken the sphere to New Orleans to run further tests. So Terry drives down there, and when he arrives, the sphere is being guarded by the Navy. They tell Terry that while the sphere is being tested, he's not allowed to go near it.
It's his property.
I know.
That's a bunch of bull.
It is. The test didn't reveal anything new, so after a lot of arguing, Terry was finally able to get the sphere back. As Terry is leaving the facility, a few reporters ask if he can make the sphere do something. Terry says sure. Every time you set it down, it rolls all over the place. In fact, the Betzes kept the sphere in a bowling bag at home because it wouldn't stay still. So Terry sets the sphere down and nothing. It's not vibrating, it's not humming, it's not moving, it's not doing anything. So Terry leaves. A little later, Terry gets a hold of his sister who tells him that there are people, not reporters, waiting for him at the airport. So Terry just drives home. Once back in Florida, the family has the sphere examined and x-rayed again. It no longer had 4 magnetic poles. And the x-rays showed that the sphere now had a seam, which wasn't there before.
Someone pulled the old switcheroo, huh?
Yep, that's what they believe. And the interior doesn't have 3 small spheres anymore, just dust. And Dr. Harder warned the Betz family to be careful. Harder didn't trust Dr. Hynek and thought maybe Hynek had something to do with the sphere being replaced. And I want to mention that years later, after Dr. Hynek passed away, his son Paul mentioned that the family had a silver sphere. All they knew about it was that their father said it had something to do with a UFO case in Florida.
Oh, it was stolen by Dr. Heine?
Hynek.
Whatever.
There's no proof that he stole it, but it's quite a coincidence that after Hynek was left alone with the sphere, suddenly it stopped working. Then a different sphere, also from Florida, shows up at Dr. Hynek's house. So all this became too much for the Betz family. They were constantly being hounded by the press and followed by what they thought were government agents. Once Jerry was even physically assaulted by someone who pretended to be a repairman. So the Betz family quickly and quietly faded back into society. They sold their house and left the island. They gave no more interviews. They wrote no books, no movies. They wanted nothing more to do with the sphere. Now Jerry is still around and has a blog where she showcases her artwork and tells the story of her life. Nowhere does she mention anything about the Betz sphere. So the Betz family never got the answer that they wanted. The answer we all want. What is the Betz sphere? There are a few theories about the Betz sphere. One is that it's a downed satellite or piece of space junk. It's a plausible theory, but if the sphere was a piece of technology, it would probably have a seam and connectors, but it has none of these. Another theory is that it's a Foo Fighter.
Hello, I've waited here for you ever long.
During World...
Tonight, I throw myself into out of the red, out of the head she sang. And I wonder.
Yo!
What? Foo Fighters.
I know the song, but may I?
Yeah, go ahead with the story about your alien balls.
During World War II, Allied aircraft encountered UFOs that followed them and were able to move at incredible speeds. The pilots gave the UFOs the nickname Foo Fighters. Foo is just a fun, meaningless word. Another theory is that it's an alien atomic weapon. People who believe this theory think that this was one of the weapons that was used to destroy Atlantis. And there could be clues that ancient nuclear weapons did exist. In the world's oldest epic, the Mahabharata, a line mentions a terrifying weapon.
A single projectile charged with all the power of the universe. An incandescent column of smoke and flame as bright as 10,000 suns rose in all its splendor.
A more mundane explanation is that the Betz sphere was just a piece of industrial equipment. An artist named James Sterling Jones said he lost the sphere a few years earlier. He had been collecting scrap metal for use in sculptures. Sterling Jones said it was a ball check valve used as a flow regulator in large pipes. He said it fell from the rack on top of his Volkswagen bus. This is the most widely accepted theory.
You trust this dirty hippie?
Be nice.
Sorry, you trust this dirty artist?
Well, a couple of problems with it being from a valve. There's only one factory on the island, a paper mill. Though they do use balls like this in valves, they only weigh about 7 or 8 pounds. The Betz sphere weighs 21 pounds. And remember, the sphere was found in the woods. It was about a mile away from the nearest road. Sure, the sphere could move on its own, but a mile seems like a long way for it to roll. Now, some claim the sphere didn't roll on its own at all. The Betts' home had uneven tile floors, and the sphere, which was perfectly balanced, was just rolling around on the tile. Now, that doesn't explain why it would come back to the same person who rolled it. Now, to be fair, when the Navy was testing it, they never saw it roll on its own. But plenty of other people did. Robert Edwards, president of a local supply company, showed a reporter a brand new stainless steel ball manufactured by Bell & Howell. It was 8 inches across and weighed just over 21 pounds. Same as the Betts sphere.
Hoax?
I don't think so. The Betts family had plenty of money, and aside from trying to win the prize from the National Enquirer, they never tried to profit from it. They could have made a fortune selling books about the sphere, especially when it was international news. They didn't. And to this day, nobody really knows what the Betts sphere is. If it was taken by the Navy or by Dr. Hynek, we may never know. In the spring of 1974, a large brush fire swept across the property. The Santa Lucia mountain range runs from Monterey and down the coast of California. For hundreds of years, stories have been told about entities that keep watch over the mountains, sometimes seen out of the corner of the eye and always from a distance. Stare too long and they vanish. If you're ever hiking in the wilderness of Big Sur and feel like you're being watched, it's because you are. Nobody knows how long the Dark Watchers have been guarding the Santa Lucias, but stories go back to the Spanish settlers in the early 18th century. The Santa Lucia Mountains were the final obstacle before reaching the Pacific Ocean, and this was a dangerous climb and had to be done carefully. And as they slowly made their way through the mountains, the settlers reported seeing dark figures watching them, and they called them Los Vigilantes Oscuros. Oh, you're not gonna jump in with a translation?
It's literally the title of the episode.
I know, but usually...
It's time to take off the training wheel, sport. My back hurts from carrying you.
Years later, American settlers reported seeing the same thing. So whether Native American tribe, Spanish settler, or casual hiker, everyone who travels the area gets an anxious feeling that they're being silently observed. It happens in the late afternoon, right before dusk. In the hills, usually when it's hazy, and you feel eyes on you from somewhere. You turn around and see a dark figure about 10 feet tall. It has long, thin legs and arms. You can't see its face, except for maybe dimly glowing eyes. Some have described them as wearing wide-brimmed hats and cloaks. And just as your eyes adjust and your brain starts to make sense of what you're seeing, the figure vanishes. According to people who have seen the Dark Watchers, they are unsettling, but don't seem to be dangerous. They spend most of their time in the shadows of the forest, but they will come out if people are close. Legend says they're entities that follow travelers through the mountains. They have excellent hearing and eyesight. And if they detect any type of technology like a phone or GPS, they won't appear. One famous person who saw the Dark Watchers was the author John Steinbeck. In his story Flight, a character sees a dark figure staring at him from on top of a hill.
Abbé looked suspiciously back every minute or so, and his eyes sought the tops of the ridges ahead. Once, on a white barren spur, he saw a black figure for a moment, but he looked quickly away, for it was one of the Dark Watchers. No one knew who the Watchers were, nor where they lived, but it was better to ignore them and never to show interest in them. They did not bother one who stayed on the trail and minded his own business.
The Dark Watchers were a bit of a family obsession for the Steinbecks. John Steinbeck's son Thomas wrote a book about them. His mother Olive actually interacted with them. She often told stories about her time as a young teacher. And to get to work, she would have to travel the dark woods of the mountains. She said she saw Dark Watchers several times, and she would leave gifts of flowers and food, and would receive gifts from the Watchers on her way home.
What gift would she get? They wouldn't kill her in her sleep?
No, the Dark Watchers would bring her flowers too.
Creepiest romance ever.
There have been sightings of Dark Watchers recently, and what's spooky is the descriptions are all very similar. I'll link you to a page where you can read a bunch of them, but here are a few of my favorites.
One day I was hiking the mountains where I lived near Blythe, California. As I went further on the trail, I felt like I was being watched. The hair on my arms stood up. I turned around, worried it was a mountain lion. At the top of the mountain, I saw a hooded human figure. I couldn't see its face. The hood and cloak looked tattered and ripped. It made no sound. I turned around and went back the way I came. I never went back to that area of the mountain range again. Dan, Phoenix, Arizona.
One day, a friend and I were coming back from Los Angeles. We passed the San Luis Obispo Reservoir and saw something at the end of the mountain. It was a really big human figure, but it wasn't. It had a black cape like the Grim Reaper and holding a staff. It was in the daytime, so I knew it wasn't a person. These Dark Watchers are real. Elizabeth, San Mateo, California.
So what are the Dark Watchers? Well, nobody knows for sure, but there are a couple of theories. The first one is that it's a simple case of pareidolia. Pareidolia is the human tendency to perceive a specific image in a random visual pattern. Some cases of pareidolia can be pretty compelling. I mean, look at this.
Well, now that will haunt me in my dreams.
Or the bacon murder clown.
Yeah, you got any funny ones? These are awful.
A pigeon poops a self-portrait.
That's more like it.
The woman who looks like a Muppet. Or these peppers, which are apparently dying to get out. Once your brain makes the connection between that random image and a real-life object, you can't not see it. The Dark Watchers could be long shadows caused by trees that, because of pareidolia, people perceive as tall figures. Maybe this is the reason they're only seen at dawn or dusk. This is when shadows are the longest. What people perceive as a Grim Reaper's staff is just a branch, and the hats are just the tops of trees. But that doesn't explain the pictures of the Dark Watchers.
Well, we got pictures.
There's a phenomenon called the Brocken Spectre. It's named after the Brocken Peak in the Harz Mountains of Germany. And for hundreds of years, locals have reported seeing shadowy figures on the Brocken Peak. But what this actually is the shadow of a hiker or a mountain climber. What happens is, when the sun is directly behind the subject, a shadow is cast on the mountain mist below. The specters are often surrounded by a rainbow halo. This rainbow effect is called a glory, and is caused by sunlight refracting off water droplets in the mist. And you can sometimes see this effect when you fly. If the conditions are right, you'll see the shadow of the plane surrounded by a glory. On the mountain, when the sun is low in the sky like dawn or dusk, the shadow can look huge. So could this be the Dark Watchers that people are seeing in the mountains, their own shadows?
Nope.
I don't know. The glories are pretty spectacular. You'd think that would have worked its way into the story. And a Brocken Spectre will stay there until the conditions change. But everyone who's claimed to see a Dark Watcher says they disappear very quickly. And skeptics have added other theories like hypoxia. Hikings at elevation where there's less oxygen could be causing hallucinations. They also try to explain that feeling of being watched is the result of being exposed to infrasound. When wind rushes down the side of a mountain, it can sometimes create sound under 19 hertz, just below human hearing. When exposed to infrasound, especially at high amplitudes, many report feeling anxious, even fearful. Others have reported chills running down their spine. But these theories don't explain how people see Dark Watchers from a moving car. Well, I'm not saying they're real, but I will admit the scientific explanations are a little thin. I don't think we can put this one in the debunked column.
Well, be still my heart.
And look, people who are new to the channel sometimes think that I'm a skeptic set out to debunk their favorite urban legend, but that's absolutely not what I'm here to do. I love the legends as much as anyone, but most of all, I want to know the truth. Because if we can debunk 99% of these stories, doesn't that make the other 1% so much more fun? In a fractured, divided world, it's nice to know there is one thing we can all agree on: the calendar. No matter your politics or your religion, we can all agree that the year is 2021, right? Well, not so fast. According to a German historian, the year is actually 1724. He says our calendar is a lie, and a big chunk of the Middle Ages never happened. Sounds crazy? Well, he says he can prove it. Let's find out why. In 1991, German historian Aribert Illig and a few colleagues proposed a radical idea. We aren't living in the 21st century. we're actually living in the 18th century. This is called the phantom time hypothesis, which says that back in 1000 AD, there was a conspiracy between the Church and the Holy Roman Emperor to change the calendar. The years 614 through 911 were completely made up. Those 300 years just didn't happen. So all that history you learned about Charlemagne in the Middle Ages, completely fabricated. In fact, Illig says that Charlemagne was specifically designed as propaganda to support the calendar change, to give the emperor and the pope more power.
An elite group of people manipulating the entire world to gain power. What else is new?
Oh, you believe this one, huh?
3 words.
Yeah?
Tin, foil, hat.
Yeah, I thought you'd say that. Okay, let's look at the calendar and see if we can figure out what the heck is going on with phantom time. So why do we even use the calendar we do? Throughout most of human history, different cultures used different calendars. Some were based on seasons, some on the sun, some on the moon, some were just arbitrary. Now, as the Romans gobbled up more territory, these different calendars made commerce complicated. So in 45 BCE, Julius Caesar proposed a standard calendar to be used by the empire.
He proposed?
Commanded.
There you go.
The Julian calendar was based on a tropical year, also known as a solar year, or one Earth orbit around the sun. And a year was 365.25 days with leap years. But a solar year is actually a little shorter than they thought. It's really 365.24219 days. That's a difference of 11 minutes. Now, 11 minutes isn't much, but the Julian calendar was losing a full day every 128 years. And after 1,500 years, the slippage was noticeable. Now, the church really liked Easter to land on March 21st, the spring equinox. But in the 1500s, Easter was landing around March 11th. This irritated Pope Gregory.
An irritated pope isn't good for anybody.
That's true. The church announced the change. A year would be 365 days, with an extra day added to every year divisible by 4, and a few other rules to keep things in sync, but that's the gist. So in 1582, the Gregorian calendar was adopted and 10 of the lost days were added back to the calendar. You went to bed on October 4th and woke up on October 15th, and that's where we've been ever since. But wait a minute. Losing a day every 128 years